I realized I wasn't meant to be seen when the wedding coordinator asked me to move. Not politely. Not quietly. She leaned down beside my chair and whispered, smiling tightly, "Hi. I think you're in the overflow section." I looked at the tiny white card clipped to my seat. 305. There were only 306 guests. The ballroom lights glittered off crystal chandeliers. Champagne glasses chimed. A violin quartet played something soft and expensive. Every table had gold calligraphy placed cards. Except mine. My table sat near the emergency exit, half hidden behind a decorative hedge wall. I watched my mother glide past me in a silver gown that probably cost more than my rent. She didn't stop. She didn't even look. She kissed Serena, my sister, the bride, adjusting her veil like she was presenting a masterpiece to the world. "Perfect," my mother said loudly. "Absolutely perfect." People turned to admire Serena. No one noticed me moving my chair back against the wall. I folded my hands in my lap. Calm. Quiet. Invisible. Exactly where I'd always been placed. Across the room, my father laughed with the groom's parents. He looked proud, relaxed, relieved. $85,000 proud. That's what they spent on Serena's wedding. And 3 weeks earlier, when I mentioned planning mine, my mother had laughed softly and said, "Sweetheart, we have to invest wisely." I remember smiling back, because by then, I already knew something they didn't. And the truth was sitting in this room, waiting to stand up and speak. There were things about this wedding that didn't make sense. The guest list was massive, people my parents barely knew. The groom's brother kept avoiding eye contact with Serena. My mother looked nervous, not joyful. And the best man? He hadn't smiled once. I noticed details most people missed. I always had. Why had my mother insisted on controlling every payment herself? Why did my father sign checks without reading them? Why did Serena look relieved instead of happy? And why, when the best man checked his phone, did he glance directly at me like I already knew what was coming? Something felt wrong. Not dramatic wrong. Quiet wrong. The kind of wrong that waits until everyone is watching before revealing itself. Before I continue, I want to ask something small. Where are you listening from tonight? I always imagine someone sitting in a kitchen late at night, maybe with tea or coffee, just needing a story that feels honest. If stories about family truths and quiet strength resonate with you, you can subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I tell these the way I lived them, calmly, without exaggeration. Because sometimes the loudest moments in life happen while we're sitting completely silent. And that's exactly how this began. My name is Elena Harper. I was 31 when Serena got married. We grew up in Connecticut, in one of those neighborhoods where lawns were perfect but conversations inside houses weren't always kind. By adulthood, our roles were already established. Serena was the investment. I was the practical one. My mother never said it cruelly. At least not loudly. She said it casually, like fact. Serena had beauty, charm, social instinct. My mother adored introducing her to people. I had stability, good grades, a steady accounting job, quiet habits, useful qualities, not celebrated ones. I lived 20 minutes from my parents in a small apartment I paid for myself. I handled my own bills, my own life, my own problems. Serena, meanwhile, rotated between career explorations funded by my parents, event planning, yoga certification, influencer branding course. Each attempt came with enthusiasm and financial support. My father rarely argued. He admired my mother deeply. Always had. She had presence, the kind that made rooms listen. When she spoke, decisions felt inevitable. I learned early that resisting her only exhausted everyone. So, I didn't. I adapted. 3 months before the wedding, we sat around my parents' dining table discussing plans. My mother spread spreadsheets across the surface. "Yes," she said brightly, "the floral installation alone is $12,000, but it sets the tone." Dad nodded immediately. Serena squealed, "Mom, it's literally my dream." I smiled and sipped water. Then I made the mistake of speaking. "I've been thinking," I said carefully, "Daniel, and I might start planning something small next year. Silence fell. My mother didn't look at me right away. She continued adjusting numbers. Then she said, lightly, "Elena, who would even come?" She smiled as if she'd made a practical observation. Dad cleared his throat. "She means budgets matter." I felt heat rise in my chest, but kept my voice steady. I wasn't asking for money. My mother finally met my eyes.
"Oh, sweetheart."
Of course not. But weddings are investments. Serena's makes sense. Serena looked uncomfortable, but didn't object. And that was the moment I understood something clearly. It wasn't about money. It was about value. Later that night, Dad walked me to the door. "You know your mother doesn't mean harm," he said gently. "I know," I answered.
And I did.
That was the complicated part. She didn't believe she was hurting me. She believed she was being rational. The first strange thing happened 2 weeks before the wedding. My father called me unexpectedly. "Elena, quick question," he said. "Did Grandma ever mention anything about her old accounts?" My stomach tightened. "My tuition account?" I asked. A pause.
"Oh, right.
That one." His tone shifted too fast. "Why?" I said. "No reason," he replied. "Just organizing paperwork." But something felt off. My grandmother had left money specifically for my education years earlier. I'd used part of it for college, and the remaining funds stayed invested under my name. Only I monitored it. Or so I thought. That night, I logged into the account. Everything looked normal. Balances untouched. Still, unease lingered. 2 hours later, at 9:02 p.m., my phone buzzed. Security alert. Unauthorized login attempt blocked. Location. My parents' address. I stared at the notification. They were trying to access it.
While I was still in the house earlier that day,
a strange calm settled over me. Because 5 weeks earlier, I had already moved every cent legally into a protected account after reviewing Connecticut beneficiary laws with a financial advisor. I hadn't told anyone. Not even Daniel.
I didn't know why I'd done it at the time.
Just instinct. Now I understood. Back at the wedding reception, servers began pouring champagne. Music swelled. The groom, Mark, looked nervous but kind. Serena beamed at every camera. My mother floated from table to table accepting compliments, like awards. I watched quietly. The best man, Mark's older brother, Jason, sat rigidly at the head table. He barely spoke. At one point he approached the bar beside me. "You're Elena," he said. Not a question. "Yes." He hesitated. "You okay sitting back here?" I smiled faintly. I'm used to strategic seating. He studied me for a moment, like he was deciding something. Then he said quietly, "You might want to stay." That was an odd thing to say at a wedding. "I wasn't planning to leave," I replied. He nodded slowly. "Good." And walked away. My internal thoughts circled. Why did he say that? What does he think is about to happen? Across the room, I noticed my mother whispering sharply to the wedding planner. Her smile looked forced now. Serena checked her phone repeatedly. Mark avoided Jason's gaze. Something beneath the celebration felt unstable. Like everyone was performing happiness while waiting for permission to stop pretending. Dinner plates were cleared. Lights dimmed. The DJ tapped the microphone. Time for speeches. Applause erupted. My mother squeezed Dad's arm proudly. First came the maid of honor, sweet, predictable stories. Then my father stood. He praised Serena endlessly. "My beautiful daughter," he said, voice thick with emotion. "You've always lit up every room." I clapped politely. He didn't mention me. That wasn't new. Still, something inside me shifted. Not hurt, recognition. Patterns finally visible. Then the DJ announced, "And now, the best man." Jason walked slowly to the microphone. The room quieted. He didn't smile. He unfolded a single sheet of paper, looked directly at Mark, then at Serena, then unexpectedly at my parents. Finally, his eyes landed on me, and he said, "I struggled deciding whether to give a traditional speech tonight or tell the truth." The room laughed lightly, but Jason didn't. My mother's smile froze. Dad leaned forward. Jason continued, "Because weddings are supposed to celebrate honesty, commitment, and trust.
He paused.
The silence stretched too long. A server stopped mid-step beside me. I felt my pulse slow instead of quicken. Instinct again. Something irreversible was about to happen. Jason inhaled. I found out 3 weeks ago, he said calmly, that my brother's fiancée has been secretly meeting someone else for over a year. The ballroom went completely still. Glasses froze halfway to lips. My mother grabbed my father's arm. Did you know? She whispered. Dad stared at the stage, speechless. Serena stood abruptly. Jason, stop. He didn't. And then he said the sentence that shattered everything. The person she's been seeing is sitting at table 12. Every head turned, including mine, because table 12 was where my parents' closest business partner sat. And suddenly I realized, this wedding wasn't just collapsing. It was exposing something far bigger than my sister's betrayal. Something connected to money, to secrets, to the account my father had tried to access. Jason lifted another page. And, before anyone interrupts, I have proof. The truth has only started to surface. For a second after Jason said it, no one moved. It wasn't the kind of silence that feels empty. It was the kind that feels sealed shut. Then someone at table 12 shifted in their chair. A fork clinked against a plate too loudly. And just like that, the illusion cracked. My mother's hand tightened around my father's arm so hard, I saw his shoulder tense. That's not possible, she whispered, but it didn't sound confident. Serena stepped forward sharply. Jason, you need to stop talking right now. Her voice shook in a way I'd never heard before. Mark, her groom, was frozen at the microphone stand, looking between his brother and his bride like he couldn't decide which reality to believe in. Jason didn't move. He just looked at Serena. Not angry. Not emotional.
Certain.
I didn't want to do this here, he said calmly. But you left me no other option. Then he turned slightly and pointed toward table 12. A man in a gray suit slowly stood up. My stomach tightened, not because I recognized him, but because my mother did. I saw it immediately.
Her face changed.
Not confusion. Recognition. That was the moment everything stopped being a wedding and started becoming something else entirely. I could feel it before anyone spoke again. This wasn't just about cheating. People don't bring printed evidence to weddings just for betrayal. Jason wasn't shaking. He wasn't emotional. He was prepared. My father leaned toward my mother. What is happening? He whispered. She didn't answer. That alone was strange. Serena was saying something to Mark, but he wasn't listening anymore. He was staring at the man Jason had pointed out, like he recognized him too. And then I noticed something else. Jason hadn't stopped holding that folder. There were multiple pages inside, not just one. And the top page wasn't a photo. It looked like a financial statement. That's when I felt it. A slow, sinking realization that whatever was about to be exposed was not limited to one secret relationship. It was layered. And somehow, I had a feeling my name might not be far from it. If you're still here with me, I want to tell you something I didn't understand at the time. People always think betrayal arrives loudly. But most of the time, it builds quietly inside normal rooms, around normal conversations, until suddenly nothing feels normal anymore. And I remember thinking that night, who planned this moment? Because it didn't feel spontaneous. It felt timed. Jason finally spoke again. This isn't just about Mark's relationship, he said. A ripple went through the room. My mother inhaled sharply. That's enough, she said quickly. This is a private matter. Jason ignored her. Instead, he opened the folder and pulled out a printed email. He held it up. This, he said, is a correspondence between Serena and our family business partner, discussing transfers made under false categorization. The room changed temperature. I saw my father's face go still. Serena laughed nervously. That's not real. Jason nodded. It is. And I have bank confirmations to match it. My mother finally spoke sharper now. You have no right. Jason cut her off without raising his voice. I actually do. Because I'm listed as executor on part of the estate accounts. That sentence landed differently. Estate accounts. Not wedding. Not relationship. Money. Now people at nearby tables were leaning in openly. Phones began to appear under tables. Recording. My chest tightened slightly, not fear exactly. More like pattern recognition. Because estate accounts meant one thing in families like mine.
Control.
Jason turned a page. This next part, he said, is where it gets complicated.
He paused.
And then he looked at me again.
Directly.
For transparency, he said, some of these funds overlap with a secondary beneficiary structure.
My throat went dry.
My father straightened. What are you talking about? He said. Jason answered calmly. Elena Harper's tuition trust. The room shifted again. That was the first time I heard my full name spoken like a trigger. My mother snapped her head toward me. For the first time all night. Really looked at me. And something in her expression didn't match confusion. It matched calculation. That was worse. My internal voice stayed quiet. So this is where it starts. Jason continued. 5 years ago, irregular withdrawals began appearing in that account. My father shook his head immediately. That's impossible. Jason didn't blink. It's documented. Serena suddenly turned toward my parents. What is he talking about? She demanded. No one answered her. Because now the room had split into two conversations. The wedding everyone came for, and the financial history no one was supposed to hear. Jason placed another document on the microphone stand. I cross-referenced transaction timestamps with login attempts, he said. My phone vibrated under the table. I didn't look at it. I already knew. He continued. Multiple access attempts came from a single household IP address.
Pause.
Then, this one. He turned the paper slightly. And my father's face strained. Because it was his address. Not Serena's. Not my mother's.
His.
My mother whispered, almost reflexively. You were checking something. But it didn't sound like a question. It sounded like a defense forming too late. Jason's voice stayed even. And each time access failed, a manual transfer request followed within 24 to 48 hours. Now the room wasn't just listening. It was calculating. Everyone was doing what I always did. Connecting patterns. I felt my pulse slow. Strangely steady. Because I remembered that night. 9:02 p.m. security alert. My father trying to access my account. While I was in the same house. And I hadn't said anything. Jason flipped another page. This isn't just about Serena, he said. He paused. And the next sentence landed heavier than the rest. It's about what's been taken from Elena over 12 years. Silence. Absolute silence. Even the violin music had stopped. My mother stood suddenly. That's ridiculous, she said. Too fast now. We have always supported Elena. A few people murmured. But Jason shook his head slightly. I didn't say support, he replied. I said taken. That word changed everything. Because support is optional. But taken implies ownership. My father's voice dropped. We never stole from her. Jason looked at him directly. I didn't use that word either. He held up another document. This is where it gets relevant to tonight's wedding. He turned toward Serena. And for the first time, her confidence cracked. Because she understood what was coming before anyone else did. Jason continued. $85,000 was allocated for this event. A murmur spread instantly. People turned toward Serena's dress, the flowers, the room itself. He nodded slowly. And 32% of it came from redirected funds originally designated under Elena's trust structure. My mother shook her head quickly. That was temporary accounting adjustments. Jason cut in again.
No.
That was reallocation without beneficiary consent. The word legal hadn't even been said yet. But everyone felt it. My father looked at my mother now. Not confused. Not supportive. Just searching. Like he was trying to find the version of events he had agreed to believe. And failing. I didn't speak. Not once. But something changed in how people looked at me. It was subtle. Tables no longer saw me as background. They saw me as origin point. Serena turned toward me. For the first time all night. Elena, she said quietly. Did you know about this? I met her eyes. And I answered honestly.
No.
That was all. But it landed heavier than accusation. because I wasn't defending anyone. I wasn't aligning. I was outside it. And that made me the only stable reference point left in the room. My mother noticed that too. I saw it in her expression. Not fear. Adjustment. Jason took a breath. "This is the last thing I'll say before I let people process this," he said. He opened the final document, and the room tightened again. Because it wasn't a financial record this time. It was an email chain. Subject line: "If Elena ever asks about her trust history, deny everything." My father flinched. My mother went still. Serena whispered, "Mom?" Jason didn't read further.
He didn't need to.
He simply said, "This wedding is built on redirected money, hidden transfers, and denied access."
He paused.
And then added almost quietly, "And tonight wasn't chosen randomly." That was the moment everything stopped feeling like exposure and started feeling like planning. Because Jason looked directly at me again and said, "I needed you here to see it, Elena." My mother finally spoke, voice low and controlled. "What exactly do you think you're proving here?" Jason didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the groom, then at Serena, then at my father, and finally said, "I'm not proving anything." He held up the final page. "I'm confirming it." And then he slid the document onto the microphone stand, where everyone could see it. A signed authorization form, with my father's signature, my mother's signature, and a beneficiary override clause I had never seen before. The room erupted instantly, but I didn't hear most of it, because my father was staring at me now, like he was waiting for me to react, like something depended on it. And for the first time all night, I understood the real reason I was in seat 305, not as background, but as witness. And possibly, the only person who hadn't been given a version of the truth yet. People always imagine chaos as loud. But the loudest moment of that night felt strangely quiet to me. The ballroom exploded into whispers, chairs scraping, guests standing halfway between curiosity and discomfort. Glasses trembled against tables. Someone laughed nervously near the bar. And yet, inside my head everything slowed. My father kept staring at me. Not angry, not defensive, almost pleading. My mother stepped forward toward Jason, voice low but sharp. "You've embarrassed everyone," she said. "You've ruined a wedding." Jason didn't react. He simply replied, calm and steady.
"No."
I stopped a performance. Serena grabbed Mark's arm. "Say something," she whispered urgently. Mark pulled away slightly. "What am I supposed to say?" he asked. "I don't even know who I'm married to right now." That sentence landed harder than any accusation. The officiant quietly slipped toward the exit. The DJ turned the music completely off. And I sat there in seat 305 realizing something unsettling. No one was asking how I felt. They were waiting to see what I would do. I watched Jason carefully. He wasn't enjoying this. There was no revenge energy in him. No triumph, which raised a question that kept repeating in my mind. Why risk this? He could have told Mark privately. He could have exposed Serena quietly. Instead, he chose public truth. And he insisted I be present. That part mattered. He had said it directly. "I needed you here to see it," meaning this wasn't only about his brother's marriage.
It was about me understanding something.
Something I hadn't discovered yet. My father finally walked toward my table. Guests parted slightly as he approached. "Elena," he said softly. I stood. For years, I had adapted to keeping peace. But now the room itself demanded clarity. "Did you know about these transactions?" he asked. I shook my head once. "No." My mother joined him quickly. Her tone shifted into familiar warmth, the voice she used when persuading people. "Sweetheart," she said, touching my arm, "there's context you don't understand." I felt the old instinct, to comfort her, to reduce tension. But something had changed. I heard myself ask calmly, "What context makes an email saying deny everything normal?" She hesitated. Only a second. But I noticed. My internal thought surfaced quietly. "She's adjusting the story." Dad spoke quickly. "We moved funds temporarily. For family needs." "Without telling me?" I asked. "It was still family money." That sentence echoed inside me. Family money. Not mine. Not grandma's intention. Just family. I nodded slowly. Then why try to log into my account 3 weeks ago? His face froze. He hadn't expected that. My mother turned sharply toward him. You tried to access it? The tension shifted instantly. Now, they were confronting each other. And for the first time, I wasn't in the middle. Jason stepped closer again. I think Elena deserves the full picture, he said. He handed me a folder. Not dramatically, just quietly. The paper felt heavier than it should. I opened it. Transaction logs.
Dates.
Amounts.
Notes.
At first my brain refused to process them. Then patterns appeared. Small withdrawals. $400. $850. $1,200. Spread across years. Categorized as temporary redistribution. My breath stayed steady. But inside, something rearranged. 12 years. I flipped pages. Totals highlighted at the bottom. $13,850. I whispered it before I realized I had spoken aloud. That's how much? Jason nodded gently. Documented minimum. My mother spoke quickly. We always replaced it. I turned another page. Replacement entries existed. But not equal. Never full. Sometimes delayed months. Sometimes missing entirely. My father's voice broke slightly. We intended to fix it. I looked up, and I understood something painful but clarifying. They didn't think they were stealing. They thought they were entitled. I expected anger. Instead, I felt relief. Not because of the money. Because confusion finally ended. All the small moments suddenly made sense. Why my requests were dismissed. Why Serena's emergencies always mattered more. Why my independence was encouraged, but unsupported. I had unknowingly financed stability for everyone else. And the strangest realization came next. I wasn't shocked. Some part of me had always known. Serena approached us, makeup slightly smudged now. Elena, she said urgently, this isn't what it looks like. I met her gaze calmly. What does it look like? She hesitated, then said quietly, I didn't know where the money came from. Jason spoke immediately. That's not accurate. He pulled another paper. Email exchanges. Serena requesting additional transfers. Serena thanking my mother for moving things around. Serena froze. You went through my emails? I was verifying estate discrepancies, Jason replied. Mark stared at her. You knew funds were being moved. Serena's voice cracked. I thought it was investments. Mom said. She stopped herself. Too late. Every eye turned toward my mother. My mother exhaled slowly. The room waited. And then she did something unexpected. She stopped pretending. I managed resources, she said calmly. That's what I've always done. Her composure returned instantly. We had 2 daughters with different needs. The sentence landed like a verdict. She continued. Elena was capable, independent, responsible. She gestured toward Serena. Serena required support. My father whispered, Linda, but she kept going. I made decisions for the good of the family. There it was. Not denial. Justification. And suddenly, everything aligned. The favoritism. The wedding. The account access. Even the attempted login weeks earlier. She wasn't hiding wrongdoing. She believed she was managing assets strategically, including me. That realization hit harder than betrayal. I wasn't neglected. I was allocated. I closed the folder gently. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't cry. Instead, I asked one question. Did Grandma know? My mother hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. Jason answered quietly. She added beneficiary protections near the end of her life. Meaning, Grandma suspected this might happen, which explained why my trust existed separately. Why legal safeguards were possible. Why 5 weeks earlier, when instinct told me to move the funds, I had unknowingly completed her protection plan. I felt a strange sense of partnership with someone no longer alive. Like she had anticipated this moment. My father looked exhausted now. Elena, he said softly, we were going to make it right. I nodded. I already did. Both parents looked confused. I continued calmly. 5 weeks ago, I moved the remaining trust funds into a protected account under Connecticut fiduciary law. My mother's eyes widened slightly. You what? You were locked out before the login attempt. Silence. Real silence this time. Jason smiled faintly, not triumphantly, just approvingly. My father sank into a chair. You didn't trust us. I answered honestly. I didn't understand you. And understanding changed everything. Mark finally asked the question everyone was thinking. Jason, why involve Elena? Jason glanced at me, then said, because when I discovered financial irregularities connected to Serena, Elena's trust kept appearing in the audit trail.
He paused.
I realized she was the only person affected who didn't know. He turned toward my parents. And silence only protects the people benefiting from it. No accusation, just fact. And suddenly I saw it clearly. This wasn't revenge. It was correction. Across the ballroom, guests began quietly leaving. The cake remained untouched. Flowers worth thousands stood witness to unraveling relationships. Mark removed his wedding ring slowly. I need space, he said to Serena. She reached for him. Mark, please. He stepped back. I married someone I don't recognize. He walked away. The doors closed behind him. Serena stood alone in the center of the room. My mother watched the scene unfold, and for the first time in my life, she looked unsure. Not defeated, but without control. And that was when I realized something important. The wedding exposure was only the beginning. Because what came next wouldn't happen here. It would happen later. When my parents needed something only I could give them. The knock came at 7:14 p.m. 3 slow taps. Not confident. Not casual. Careful. I already knew who it was before opening the door. You don't forget the rhythm of people who raised you. I stood still in my kitchen for a moment, letting the sound exist without rushing toward it. The apartment smelled like garlic and basil from dinner I hadn't finished cooking. Rain pressed softly against the windows. Another knock. Softer this time. I opened the door. My father stood there first. Older. Smaller somehow. Behind him, my mother held her purse tightly against her chest like armor. Neither of them spoke immediately. And in that silence, I understood something before a single word was said. They weren't visiting. They were asking. My father finally said it. Elena, we need your help. 5 years. 5 years since the wedding. 5 years since the truth walked into daylight. And now they were standing on my doorstep. They hadn't come to birthdays. They hadn't called on holidays. Communication after the wedding had faded into polite distance, then almost nothing. So why now? Why together? Why nervous? My mother avoided eye contact as she stepped inside. She scanned my apartment. Modern furniture, clean lines, quiet success. Her gaze lingered on small details. Framed certifications on the wall. A business award near my bookshelf. Proof I had built a life without them. My internal thoughts surfaced calmly. They didn't expect this version of me. I closed the door gently. What happened? I asked. They exchanged a look. And suddenly I felt the same tension as that wedding night. Something large was coming. After the wedding exposure, I moved out permanently within a week. Not dramatically. Just efficiently. I changed addresses. Separated finances. Started working longer hours at my accounting firm. Then something unexpected happened. Clients began asking me questions beyond basic accounting. Trust protection. Estate security. Family financial disputes. I realized how many people quietly face situations like mine. So I specialized. Connecticut fiduciary law. Asset protection consulting. Within 2 years, I opened my own practice. Small at first, then steadily growing. Because people value someone who understands betrayal without dramatizing it. Daniel and I eventually separated, not from conflict, but from realizing our paths diverged. It was calm, respectful. Life became quieter, cleaner, stable, peaceful, which is why seeing my parents standing in my living room now felt like time bending backward. My father sat at the table. His hands trembled slightly.
We're in trouble, he said.
My mother exhaled slowly. Our investments collapsed last year. I waited. No reaction yet. She continued. We trusted a partner. There were loans involved. My mind connected instantly. Table 12. The business partner from the wedding. What kind of trouble? I asked. Dad swallowed. We could lose the house. The sentence lingered between us. My childhood home. My mother finally met my eyes. We need financial guidance. Not money. Guidance. That distinction mattered. But then she added quietly. And possibly legal representation. There it was. They needed my expertise. The very independence they once minimized. My mother leaned forward. You've done very well, she said gently. We're proud of you. I noticed the phrasing. Not apology. Reframing. I asked calmly, why me? Dad answered first. Because you understand these systems. That wasn't always considered valuable. He winced slightly. Mom spoke quickly. Elena, we made mistakes. But family helps family. The familiar sentence echoed from years ago. They told me it was temporary. They said family helps family. I felt the past press against the present. I asked quietly, are you asking me to fix it or forgive it? They didn't answer immediately. And that silence told me everything. My father pulled a folder from his bag. Thicker than mine had been at the wedding. I opened it. Foreclosure notices. Debt restructuring documents. Legal claims. And one detail stood out immediately. Unauthorized guarantees. Signed by both of them. Backed by personal assets. Including retirement funds. My professional mind activated automatically. This partner transferred liability to you, I said. Dad nodded. We didn't see it coming. I almost smiled, not cruelly. Control had finally turned on them. My mother's voice softened. We trusted someone. I noticed something surprising inside myself. No anger. No satisfaction. Just clarity. They weren't powerful anymore. They were scared. And fear had replaced certainty. I realized revenge had already happened naturally. Life had balanced itself without me lifting a finger. But closure required something else. I closed the folder carefully. I'll help, I said. Relief flooded my father's face instantly. But I raised a hand gently. Under conditions. My mother stiffened slightly. What conditions? I spoke calmly. Full transparency. Every account. Every past transfer. No omissions. She nodded quickly. Of course. And I continued. We document everything formally. Client relationship only. Dad blinked. You mean professionally? Yes.
My voice stayed even.
No family exceptions. The shift landed heavily. For the first time, our relationship had structure. Boundaries. Defined roles. My mother hesitated, then said quietly, okay. That single word carried more surrender than any apology could. Over the next weeks, we worked together. Not as parent and child. As client and advisor. I reviewed decades of financial history. And piece by piece, the full picture emerged. The withdrawals from my trust weren't isolated. My mother had always believed resources should flow toward whoever appeared most socially successful. Image over stability. Presentation over fairness. Serena's wedding. Business investments. Lifestyle appearances. All built on the same philosophy. My father signed because he trusted her judgment. And slowly, he began seeing it himself. One evening during a meeting, he said quietly, I should have asked more questions. It wasn't dramatic, but it was honest. The real confrontation didn't happen in a ballroom. It happened at my office desk under fluorescent lights. My mother sat across from me. No audience. No performance. She looked tired. Elena, she said carefully, do you hate me? I thought about it, then answered truthfully. No. She exhaled. I always believed I was helping the family succeed. I know, I said. That doesn't mean it didn't hurt you. I nodded once. It did. Silence stretched. Then she said something I had never heard before. I underestimated you. Not apology exactly, but acknowledgement. And strangely, that was enough. We negotiated settlements, restructured debts, protected remaining assets. They didn't lose everything, but they downsized, sold the big house, moved into a smaller condo. Serena eventually rebuilt her life too, quietly working a real job for the first time. Family gatherings became smaller, less performative, more honest. No one called me the ugly one again, not because appearances changed, but because power had. 2 years later, I sat on my balcony overlooking the water, reviewing client files while sunlight reflected across the harbor. My business had grown beyond anything I imagined. People trusted me with their most vulnerable situations, not because I was perfect, but because I understood silence and boundaries and the cost of being underestimated. Peace didn't arrive dramatically. It arrived gradually, like quiet after long noise. I used to think justice meant confrontation, exposure, winning. But real closure felt different. It was sitting across from my parents without resentment controlling the room. It was helping without sacrificing myself. It was knowing my value no longer depended on comparison. The wedding didn't destroy my family. It revealed it. And once truth existed openly, everyone had to become more honest versions of themselves, including me. Now I want to ask you something. Who was really wrong here? My mother, who believed she was managing resources for the family. My father, who trusted without questioning. Serena, who accepted help without asking where it came from. Or me, for protecting myself first? Would you have helped them after everything? Or would you have closed the door? Tell me what you would have done. And if this story stayed with you, there's another one waiting. Please like and subscribe before you leave. It's free, and trust me, it motivates us to create more stories for you. At the same time, it helps reach more people who can relate to the story. Thanks for watching, folks.